On paper, this should have been one of the closest matches of the tournament. The reigning world champion Wu Yize, the current world number 1, Judd Trump, two of the most dangerous attacking players in professional snooker, both arrived in excellent form. Both had already produced outstanding performances earlier in the tournament. Both looked fully capable of lifting the Shanghai Masters trophy. Yet when the match was over, there was only one player who looked like a champion. And surprisingly, it wasn't the reigning world champion. Judd Trump defeated Wu Yize 10-6 to reach another Shanghai Masters final, but the final score doesn't tell the entire story. Because this wasn't simply about scoring more points. It wasn't simply about making more centuries. It wasn't even about experience. Instead, this match became a perfect demonstration of why Judd Trump remains one of the most complete snooker players in the world. Throughout 16 frames, Trump repeatedly solved every problem Wu Yize presented. Whenever the Chinese star produced a brilliant break, Trump answered immediately. Whenever Wu tried to build momentum, Trump took it away. Whenever the pressure increased, Trump looked even stronger. And perhaps the most impressive part, he never allowed the reigning world champion to believe he was truly back in control. But how exactly did Trump do it? Why couldn't Wu Yize, despite making 3-century breaks, stop the world number 1? Why did the momentum repeatedly return to Trump? And what happened during the second session that completely changed the match? To answer those questions, we need to go back to the beginning. Because before a single ball had been struck, this already looked like a potential classic. The perfect semi-final. The Shanghai Masters has always attracted the biggest names in world snooker. Although it isn't a ranking event, players treat the tournament with enormous respect because only the very best receive invitations. By reaching the semi-finals, both Judd Trump and Wu Yize had already proved they belonged among the tournament's strongest contenders. Wu Yize entered the match carrying enormous expectations. Only a few months earlier, he had become world champion, continuing the remarkable rise of Chinese snooker after Zhao Xintong's success. Playing at home made him one of the crowd favorites. Many believed this tournament could become another unforgettable chapter in Chinese snooker history. Standing opposite him, however, was perhaps the worst possible opponent. Judd Trump wasn't simply another elite player. He arrived in Shanghai as the world number 1, full of confidence after a dominant 6-0 victory over John Higgins in the quarterfinals. Even more remarkably, Higgins scored only 37 points throughout that entire match. That performance alone suggested Trump had reached Shanghai in extraordinary form. Still, very few people expected one player to control so much of this semi-final. The opening session ended with Trump holding only a narrow 5-4 advantage. Everything suggested a dramatic finish. Instead, the second session became a masterclass, and it all started with one seemingly ordinary frame. At first glance, the final score of 10-6 suggests that Judd Trump controlled the match from start to finish. But that isn't what happened. The opening session was far more competitive than the final result suggests. In fact, after the first 2 frames, Trump found himself trailing 0-2. For the home crowd, it looked like Wu Yize had settled into the match perfectly. His cue action was relaxed. His long potting looked confident. His positional play was flowing naturally. Most importantly, he wasn't intimidated by the world number 1. Frame 1, the opening frame, belonged entirely to Wu Yize. A composed 61 break immediately gave him confidence and demonstrated exactly why he had become world champion only a few months earlier. There were no signs of nerves, no hesitation, no conservative play. Wu attacked from the very beginning and was rewarded with the first frame. For Judd Trump, however, this wasn't a disaster. One of Trump's greatest strengths throughout his career has been his ability to ignore the scoreboard during the early stages of a match. Many players begin forcing difficult shots after losing the opening frame. Trump rarely does. He simply gathers information, he studies the table conditions, he observes his opponent's confidence, and he waits. That patience would soon become one of the biggest reasons for his victory. Frame 2, Wu Yize continued to impress. Another excellent contribution of 53 helped him secure the second frame and move into a 2-0 lead. At this point, the audience inside the arena sensed that something special might be happening. The reigning world champion was dictating the tempo. Trump still hadn't produced the fluent attacking snooker everyone expected. Against many opponents, a 2-0 deficit could easily become 4-0, but not against Judd Trump. This was the moment when experience quietly entered the match. Instead of chasing spectacular recoveries, Trump simplified his game. He reduced unnecessary risks. He became more selective with his shot choices, and gradually the momentum began to change. Frame 3. The third frame marked Trump's first real statement. An outstanding 82 break finally announced his arrival. For the first time in the match, Wu spent an extended period sitting in his chair, while Trump controlled the table. More importantly, Trump didn't just win the frame. He won it convincingly. That mattered psychologically. Instead of feeling pressure at 0-2, Trump suddenly reminded everyone why he remains one of the most feared break builders in world snooker. The scoreboard now read 2-1. The comeback had begun. Frame 4, if Frame 3 was Trump's response, Frame 4 was proof that it wasn't a coincidence. Another superb break of 60 brought the match level at 2-2. Within less than an hour, everything had changed. Wu had gone from looking completely comfortable to watching his lead disappear. Momentum in snooker is an unusual thing. Unlike many sports, there is no clock, no timeout, no opportunity to completely reset the match. When one player begins seeing every positional route clearly, confidence can build incredibly quickly. That is exactly what happened here. Trump was beginning to see the table better with every visit. Frame 5, Wu refused to disappear. The reigning world champion produced another excellent break, this time 103. It was one of the finest visits of the entire opening session. Just when Trump appeared ready to take full control, Wu reminded everyone that he was capable of producing world-class snooker himself. The score became 3-2, and suddenly the pressure shifted once again. This was perhaps the first truly important psychological test for Trump. Would he become frustrated after such a brilliant response? The answer, absolutely not. Frame 6. Trump answered immediately. A composed 56 break restored parity at 3-3. This sequence perfectly demonstrated the biggest difference between the two players throughout the match. Every time Wu won a frame, Trump answered immediately. He never allowed his opponent to build a winning streak. He never allowed the crowd to create sustained momentum. He never gave Wu the emotional advantage that often becomes decisive in long matches. That ability to respond instantly would define the entire semifinal. Frames 7 and 8. As the first session continued, both players exchanged frames once again. The quality remained exceptionally high. Neither player was making many obvious mistakes. Instead, the difference came from tiny positional decisions, small safety exchanges, one missed long red, one imperfect cannon. Against elite opponents, those tiny moments often decide entire frames. Trump gradually began winning more of those invisible battles, not because he was dramatically better, but because he consistently made slightly better decisions under pressure. Those tiny advantages accumulated frame after frame. Frame 9. The final frame of the opening session proved enormously important. Trump produced another controlled break of 91, taking a narrow 5-4 lead into the interval. Looking only at the scoreboard, the advantage appeared minimal. One frame, nothing more, but psychologically, the situation looked completely different. Trump had recovered from 0-2 down. He had already shown he could answer every challenge, and perhaps most importantly, he walked into the interval believing he had figured something out. Wu Yize, meanwhile, had played excellent snooker. He had already compiled 2 major breaks. He had matched the world number 1 for long periods, yet he still found himself behind. That can be one of the most frustrating feelings in professional sport, because when you play well, and you're still losing, you begin searching for solutions that may not actually exist. Neither player knew it yet, but the second session would be a completely different match, and it would begin with one frame that changed everything. Every great snooker match has a moment when the momentum changes. Sometimes it happens because of one incredible clearance, sometimes because of a costly mistake, and sometimes because one player suddenly reaches a level that the other simply cannot match. For this semifinal, that moment arrived immediately after the interval. Although Trump led only 5-4, the psychological picture was already beginning to favor the world number 1. He had recovered from 2 frames behind. He had answered every challenge. Now he had the opportunity to strike first in the evening session, and he didn't waste it. Frame 10, the perfect start. Professional players often say that the first frame after an interval can determine the direction of an entire session. If the trailing player wins it, confidence immediately returns. If the leading player extends the advantage, the pressure becomes significantly greater. Trump understood exactly how important this frame was. He produced a superb 91 break, extending his lead to 6-4. On paper, it was only a 2-frame advantage. In reality, it felt much bigger. Wu now had to chase the match again. The pressure was no longer on Trump. It had completely shifted onto the reigning world champion. Wu Yize's brilliant response. Champions rarely disappear quietly. Wu Yize certainly didn't. In the very next frame, he produced one of the finest breaks of the entire match. A magnificent 112th century reduced the deficit to 6-5. For a few minutes, the atmosphere inside the arena completely changed. The crowd came alive. Momentum appeared to swing back toward the Chinese star. Many players would have felt enormous pressure after watching an opponent compile such a brilliant century, especially in front of a home audience. But Judd Trump isn't most players. The moment that changed everything. This is where the match was truly won, not because Wu played poorly, but because Trump produced the perfect response. Instead of allowing the century from Wu Yize to become the beginning of a comeback, Trump immediately answered with a century of his own. 112, no hesitation, no tactical struggle, no opportunity for Wu to build confidence, just one clinical visit that restored the two-frame cushion. Then, he did something even more extraordinary. In the very next frame, Trump produced another century, 113, back-to-back centuries, exactly when the pressure reached its highest point. Why these two frames were so important. Many people look at centuries only as statistics, but their psychological impact can be enormous. Imagine spending an entire frame producing a beautiful 112 break to reduce the score to 6-5. You finally feel the momentum returning. The crowd is behind you. You believe the comeback has started. Then your opponent immediately responds with, and before you've even had time to recover, suddenly everything you worked so hard to achieve disappears. Within less than 30 minutes, Wu went from believing the match was alive to finding himself trailing 8-5. That sequence may have been the single most important passage of the entire semifinal. Experience under pressure. This is where Judd Trump's experience became impossible to ignore. Many players know how to score heavily when they feel comfortable. The very best players know how to score heavily when they absolutely have to. Trump recognized that allowing Wu to win 2 or 3 consecutive frames would completely change the match. So he prevented it, not through spectacular trick shots, not through risky aggression, but through flawless break building. Every positional shot looked simple. Every cannon developed the reds perfectly. Every recovery shot maintained complete control of the cue ball. It looked effortless. In reality, it was the product of decades competing at the very highest level. Wu was still playing excellent snooker. One of the most remarkable aspects of this match is that Wu Yize wasn't collapsing. Quite the opposite. He continued producing world-class snooker. His century breaks of 103, 110 and 112 would normally be enough to win many professional matches. The problem was, he happened to face Judd Trump at exactly the wrong moment. Trump simply reached another level. Every time Wu produced something brilliant, Trump produced something even better. That is an incredibly difficult situation for any player, because eventually you begin asking yourself a dangerous question. What else can I do? The invisible advantage. Statistics tell only part of the story. The real difference appeared between the visits. Trump never looked rushed, never looked frustrated, never showed signs of panic. Even when Wu answered with a century, Trump's body language barely changed. That emotional stability forced Wu to carry almost all of the psychological pressure. As Trump later explained after the match, he always believed the opportunities would come, and when Wu made slightly more mistakes during the second session, Trump punished almost every one of them. Those mistakes weren't dramatic. There were no complete collapses, just tiny inaccuracies. A safety played a little too thin, a missed positional angle, an imperfect long red. Against many opponents, those mistakes are survivable. Against Judd Trump, they become frame-losing opportunities. By the time the score reached 8-5, the match had entered completely different territory. Wu Yize still had the ability to produce big breaks, but now he needed something even harder. He needed to stop one of the greatest frontrunners in modern snooker. And history has shown, once Judd Trump smells the finish line, very few players manage to stop him. When people remember this semifinal, they'll probably remember one thing first. Judd Trump defeated the reigning world champion 10-6, but the final score tells only part of the story. To understand why Trump won, we need to look deeper into the numbers, and surprisingly, some of the statistics make Wu Yize's defeat even more remarkable. 3 centuries, and still losing. Normally, making 3-century breaks is enough to win almost any professional match. Wu Yize produced outstanding breaks of 103, 110 and 112. Those weren't lucky clearances. They were world-class visits that demonstrated exactly why he had become world champion. Against most opponents, 3 centuries would probably have been enough. Against Judd Trump, they weren't. That alone tells you how extraordinary Trump's level really was. Trump's relentless consistency. Unlike Wu, Trump didn't rely solely on spectacular scoring. Instead, he built pressure throughout the entire match. His biggest breaks included 113 100 and 12 91 82 61 60, but perhaps even more importantly, he added numerous contributions in the 50-point range. That meant almost every good opportunity became a frame-winning visit. Even when Trump didn't make a century, he usually made enough points to take complete control of the frame. This is something many fans overlook. Championship snooker isn't always about producing the highest break. It's about producing enough points every single time you get an opportunity. And in that department, Trump was simply better. Total points. Perhaps the most impressive statistic is the overall points scored. Throughout 16 frames, Judd Trump scored 1,016 points. Wu Yize scored 626. That means Trump outscored the reigning world champion by almost 400 points. Think about that for a moment. This wasn't a narrow victory built on a few lucky frames. This was sustained superiority over an entire match. Frame after frame, visit after visit, shot after shot, Trump simply accumulated more points whenever opportunities appeared. Average points per frame. The average tells a similar story. Trump averaged approximately 63.5 points per frame. Wu averaged only 39.1. That difference explains why Trump constantly looked more comfortable. He wasn't depending on miracle recoveries. He wasn't scraping through tactical battles. Instead, he repeatedly built commanding leads before Wu had time to respond. That's exactly how elite players reduce pressure, by scoring heavily early. The real difference. Many people will point to Trump's 2 centuries. Others will mention Wu's mistakes during the evening session. Those things certainly mattered, but perhaps the biggest difference was something much simpler. Consistency. Trump almost never disappeared from the scoreboard, even when he wasn't making centuries. He was making 60, or 50, or 80, he kept adding pressure. Wu, meanwhile, produced spectacular moments, but they arrived less consistently. Professional snooker is rarely decided by your very best frames. It's usually decided by the average quality of every frame. That is where Trump created the gap, winning the small battles. Another important detail often goes unnoticed. Trump didn't need to dominate every frame. He simply needed to dominate the important moments. Whenever Wu produced something special, Trump answered. Whenever the score became close, Trump won the next key frame. Whenever momentum threatened to shift, Trump stopped it immediately. Those moments don't always appear in statistical tables, but they determine championships. The break distribution. Look closely at how the big breaks arrived. Wu's centuries were spread across the match. They were impressive, but isolated. Trump's biggest contributions came exactly when he needed them most. The 91 immediately after the interval. The back-to-back centuries of 112 and 113. Those weren't just high breaks. They completely changed the psychological balance of the match. Timing matters just as much as size. And Trump's timing was almost perfect. Numbers never tell the whole story, but they rarely lie. Every important category favored Judd Trump. More total points, higher average, more winning visits, more consistency, better scoring at crucial moments. Yet statistics alone still don't explain why the match unfolded this way, because numbers can't measure confidence, they can't measure composure, they can't measure experience, and perhaps most importantly, they can't measure what happens inside a player's mind when momentum begins to disappear. To truly understand why Judd Trump won this semifinal, we have to look beyond the scoreboard. We have to look inside the psychological battle. What this victory really means. When the final black disappeared into the pocket, Judd Trump didn't celebrate wildly. There was no emotional outburst, no dramatic fist pump, no visible relief. Instead, he simply acknowledged the crowd, shook Wu Yize's hand and quietly walked away. For many players, reaching another Shanghai Masters final would be the biggest achievement of the season. For Judd Trump, it looked like another day's work. And perhaps that says more about his current level than anything else. This wasn't just another win. At first glance, people will remember only one statistic. Trump won 10-6. But if you watch the match carefully, it became clear that this victory represented something much bigger. He had just defeated the reigning world champion in China in front of a home crowd, after the opponent produced 3-century breaks. Most players would struggle under those circumstances. Trump looked comfortable. That is the difference between elite players and all-time great players, the Shanghai specialist. There seems to be something special about Judd Trump whenever he plays in Shanghai. The conditions suit his attacking style. The fast cloth allows his cue ball control to shine. His confidence on these tables is obvious. This victory sent him into his 5th Shanghai Masters final, reinforcing his remarkable record at the tournament. That's no coincidence. Great players often develop favorite venues. Some dominate at the Crucible. Others feel unstoppable at Alexandra Palace. For Trump, Shanghai has become one of those places where he consistently produces his very best snooker, a warning to every remaining opponent. Sometimes one match changes the perception of an entire tournament. This was one of those matches. It wasn't simply that Trump reached the final, it was the manner in which he did it. He defeated one of the world's strongest players without ever allowing the match to slip away. Even when Wu Yize played brilliant snooker, Trump remained in control. Even when momentum threatened to change, Trump immediately responded. That sends a powerful message to every remaining opponent. If you want to beat Judd Trump, playing well probably won't be enough. You'll need to play almost perfectly. What about Wu Yize? Despite the defeat, there are many positives for Wu Yize. Making 3 centuries against the world number 1 is an outstanding achievement. Competing with Trump for long periods demonstrates that his world championship victory was no accident. More importantly, his reaction after the match revealed impressive maturity. Instead of searching for excuses, Wu accepted responsibility. He described the tournament as an excellent start to the new season and said he would continue improving the areas of his game that still needed work. He also wished Zhao Xintong success in keeping the Shanghai Masters title in China. That attitude often separates future champions from players who fade away. Losses become valuable only if players learn from them. Wu appears determined to do exactly that. Why Trump won? So, after 16 frames, after nearly an entire day of snooker, why did Judd Trump win? The answer isn't one spectacular shot. It isn't one incredible century. It isn't one mistake from Wu Yize. It was the combination of several decisive advantages. First, Trump remained calm after losing the opening 2 frames. Second, he controlled the most important moments of the match, especially immediately after the interval. Third, his back-to-back centuries completely destroyed Wu's growing momentum. Fourth, his experience allowed him to make better decisions under pressure. And finally, whenever Wu offered even the smallest opportunity, Trump punished it immediately. Those are the habits of a champion, the bigger picture. This semi-final wasn't simply another victory in Trump's career. It was a reminder of why he has remained at the very top of professional snooker for so many years. His game continues to evolve. His break building remains among the very best in the world. His tactical decisions are becoming even more mature, and perhaps most importantly, his mental game is stronger than ever. Many players can produce spectacular snooker. Very few can produce it exactly when the match demands it. That is what separates champions from legends. Final thoughts. The scoreboard says 10-6. The statistics tell us Trump produced 2 centuries and a series of heavy breaks. The interviews reveal a player who never doubted his own game and simply waited for opportunities. But together, they tell a much deeper story. This wasn't a victory built on luck. It wasn't the result of one bad session from Wu Yize. It was the product of superior timing, superior experience, superior decision-making, and world-class break building. Judd Trump didn't win this match because Wu Yize played badly. He won because, when the match reached its most important moments, he simply became the better player, and that is exactly why he deserved his place in another Shanghai Masters final.